Hello, everybody. It's Walter, your favorite historian, educator, and social studies extraordinaire, here today to teach you about the ratification of the United States Constitution. This beautiful document you see right here. All right? It's good stuff. Now, as you might imagine, the ratification of the U.S. Constitution was not something that came about quickly or easily. As a matter of fact, we weren't exactly sure at that time whether or not the thing was even going to get ratified. All right? So all that hard work by the framers during the Constitutional Convention of 1787 in Philadelphia might have all been in vain. Thank goodness it was not. All right. So the whole timeline of the process lasted roughly from September 17th, 1787, when the Constitution was signed in Philadelphia, and the 21st of June, 1788, when the ninth and decisive state gave its approval, bringing the document into effect. All right. Of course, there were other things afterward, but we are going to cover before, during, and afterwards. All right. So that you get a full, comprehensive analysis of just how exactly the Constitution came into being and not just see it as the law of the land. All right. So again, the Constitution of the United States, after it was drafted, was signed on the 17th of September, 1787, which, of course, is Constitution Day in the United States. All right. After that happened, it was subsequently submitted to the Congress of the Confederation for their approval. And at this point, they could have blocked it altogether from going forward, but they didn't. All right. After several days of debate, they voted on it and voted to submit it to the states for ratification by way of ratifying conventions in at least 9 of the states to bring it into effect. This is according to Article 7 of the United States Constitution, ladies and gentlemen. So with that in mind, each state legislature had to call a ratifying convention for the purposes of approving this glorious document. All right? Rather than the state legislature itself. And the reason they did it like that was so that the Constitution could be approved, at least at face value, by a greater segment of the population, thus the people. The first 3 words of the Constitution are what? We the people. Exactly. All right? So, according to Article 7 of the proposed Constitution, 9 states minimum had to give their approbation, all right, and go along with it before it could go into effect. All right. And this was a severe departure from the Articles of Confederation, which required the approval of all 13 states before any substantive changes could be made. All right. So as the Constitution's copies were circulated amongst the states, 2 distinct groups of people formed. They were known as Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Federalists were those in support of the proposed Constitution, and Anti-Federalists were what? Against it, of course. Federalists tended to be the more prominent people in society, you know, judges, lawyers, professors, bankers, merchants, all right? Anti-Federalists tended to be, you know, the common guy, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, you know, the latrine cleaner, and so forth and so on, all right? And, you know, these two did battle quite often in many of the states where the ratification vote would be very close, ladies and gentlemen, almost to defeat, all right? So we go down the timeline of the states one by one as they gave their acquiescence to the proposed Constitution. So on December 7th, 1787, Delaware became the first state to ratify the proposed Constitution by a unanimous vote. Isn't that wonderful? All right. 5 days later, on December 12th, Pennsylvania became the second state. And for the record, it was the first large state to give its approval of the proposed Constitution by a vote of 46-23, which was very good. All right. New Jersey became the third state on December 18th, 1787. All right. Georgia became the fourth state on January 1st, 1788. And for the record, Georgia's delegation also voted unanimously to approve the proposed Constitution. All right. Connecticut became the fifth state on January 9th of 1788 by a 128-40 vote. In Massachusetts, the process was kind of rocky, all right? And the state was very, very divided. Shays' Rebellion was very fresh in the minds of a lot of people, and that pushed a lot of people towards it, all right? But on the other hand, there were a lot of people opposed it. They were scared of this big government being proposed in the Constitution, and they were just said no, because it didn't have any Bill of Rights in it. Bill of Rights was a major thing for a lot of people, all right? However, when prominent figures such as Samuel Adams and John Hancock came around to giving their support to it, ultimately Massachusetts would become the sixth state by a vote of 187 to 168. All right. So Massachusetts would ratify it, by the way, on the 6th of February, 1788. All right. Many of those who were opposed only went along with it with the guarantee that a Bill of Rights would be added later on at some point, which of course would be done. My own state of Maryland graciously ratified without much opposition, hardly any as a matter of fact, on April 28th of 1788, making us the seventh state to ratify the proposed Constitution. South Carolina ratified it on May 23rd, 1788 by a vote of 149 to 73, making them the eighth state to ratify the proposed Constitution. In New Hampshire, ladies and gentlemen, pay attention, here we go. In New Hampshire, by a vote of 57 to 46, they became the ninth and decisive state on the 21st of June, 1788. All right? With New Hampshire's approval of the proposed Constitution, the document officially became the law of the land, legal and binding. That is why I said pay attention, because New Hampshire's ratification brought it into existence as the law of the United States. All right? Very important thing. 4 days later, on the 25th of June, Virginia ratified by a close vote of 89 to 79. Important figures such as Madison, Randolph, John Marshall, George Wythe, Pendleton, and many others, all right, all threw their weight behind it, all right, and ultimately Virginia gave its approval. Bill of Rights was a major concern for them as well. And last but not least, New York, all right, which leaned more towards the anti-federalists, all right. You would have thought they would have rejected it. You know, the state was under extreme pressure to ratify because Virginia and Pennsylvania had gone along with it. So New York would have looked pretty stupid if they had said no. So through the great help of the great statesman and founding father Alexander Hamilton, with speeches, and along with John Jay and James Madison, all three of them with the Federalist Papers, which is debatable, but definitely something to check out. Check out my video on that. New York did ratify on July the 26th of 1788 by a vote of 30 to 27, making New York the 11th state and the last one to ratify before the national government went into effect. All right. Now, with New York's ratification, the Confederation Congress would pass a resolution on September 13, 1788, to put the Constitution into effect in the 11 states which had already ratified it. All right. Delaware through New York. All right. That said, the new federal government began operating on the 4th of March, 1789, replacing the Articles of Confederation. Check that out in my other video as well. All right. As such, George Washington was inaugurated as the first president on April the 30th, 1789. The first Congress, all right, would begin on the 4th of March, 1789, but had to adjourn because they obviously didn't have a quorum to actually function. And the first Supreme Court sat on the 2nd of February, 1790, all right. The Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, although it was 12 that were actually passed, were passed by the Congress on September 25th of 1789 and ratified, of course, December 15th, 1791, Bill of Rights Day, if you didn't know. And under the threat of economic pressure, the two holdouts that demanded the Bill of Rights more than any other two states, North Carolina and Rhode Island, finally gave in. All right, North Carolina ratified on November 21st, 1789, and Rhode Island on May the 29th, 1790, after the federal government threatened to cut off all trade with them. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how the U.S. Constitution was ratified, becoming the law of our nation. Thanks for watching. Any questions, leave them down below, and I'll be happy to answer them. Hope you learned something. Knowledge is power, and I'll talk to you at the next video. Peace.